What are the implications of Hamas seeming to want to cause civilian casualties in the way that you've described?
Well, I mean, I think there's legal implications and there's policy implications. And we need to keep in mind that when legal advisors in combat tell commanders you may do something, it doesn't mean the commander should do it. The may is the legal question. The should is the operational strategic policy question. So I think one consideration here is if we know Hamas is preventing civilians from evacuating a certain area because they're hoping that they become civilian casualties, there may be good strategic reason to refrain from conducting an attack. Of course, that gives Hamas some advantage as well, but that's a tough operational decision for military leaders. What's more important? That I attack the target and give Hamas the advantage of the images of casualties, or that I refrain from attacking the target? They don't get that advantage, but then I don't get the target. I think the attack in the refugee center is an example of how difficult that decision-making process is. So obviously, when Israel chose to launch that attack, there must have been an assessment that the kind of informational blowback from civilian casualties would not be significant enough to offset the benefit of killing the target. Of course, Natasha, the real irony there is the immediate media reaction was Israel attacks refugee camp, when my immediate reaction was, why was there a senior Hamas commander in a refugee camp? And we know the answer to that is because either way they win. So the implication from a legal standpoint is much simpler, I think. First off, I've never been an advocate of this involuntary, voluntary human shield dichotomy, because if I'm looking down the barrel of my rifle, how do I know whether you're there because you want to be or you're compelled to be? You're just a civilian. So to me, you cannot directly target those human shields, but there's a much higher probability that they are going to become incidental victims of an attack on the target because the enemy put them there. Now, you still have to do your best to avoid that. And as Arthur says, they're still considered in the proportionality equation. But if they're being placed next to vital military objectives, the odds of the proportionality equation leading to a legal no-go on that target goes down significantly by virtue of the nature of the target itself. And this is why I think in many cases, what Hamas is doing is they're hoping that Israel attacks the target. They're not naive. If you put your command and control center under a hospital and the Israelis find it, they're not going to leave it alone. Eventually, they're going to have to do something about it. And so from a legal standpoint, I think at some point, and Arthur would be better at this than I would hope at some point, some international tribunal would consider the possibility that somebody should be held accountable for the murder of civilians, not because they were killed at their hand, but because they set the conditions where the other side to the conflict had no other option but to attack a target.